Okay, should we start? Okay, all right. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to Tinitalk. My name is Tini Fadzillah from the Coach Partnership. And in this episode, it's actually quite exciting. We're going to be talking about in the heart of celebration. Okay, we're joined, unlike our previous episodes where I have one guest, today we have two guests. So let me introduce them to you. The first is Dr. Fadzillah Leggett. Yes, if you caught the last name.
Such a coincidence. We have the same name.
Amazing, isn't it? She's also my sister, is an associate professor of cultural anthropology at Middle Tennessee State University, where she teaches courses on gender, religion, medical anthropology, and Southeast Asia. She and her husband, Will Leggett, also an anthropologist, published a book in 2021 titled Feel Stories, Experiences Affect, thank you, and the Lessons of Anthropology in the 21st Century. She's currently conducting research on girl cultures, so interesting, and the influence of imagined futures in their everyday lives. Welcome, Ida.
Thank you.
I call her Ida. I don't call her Dr. Leggett because I'm her sister.
I keep telling her to call me Dr. Leggett. I don't know why she does that.
And of course, I have a dear friend who I've known for how long?
Oh my God, just a couple of years.
Yeah, like 15, 20 maybe?
20.
Yeah, we've known each other for a long time. Dr. Casey Lee is a UK trained and registered counseling psychologist. He completed his doctoral studies in London and has 14 years clinical experience, having worked in the UK, China, and Singapore. He is experienced in helping personnel working in challenging corporate environments, high-level executives, business owners, and entrepreneurs across various regions and industries. So welcome to the both of you. So today we're going to be talking about in the heart of celebration, right? And Sari, my producer, and myself, we were discussing this, and it's such an appropriate topic, we feel, given the time of the year. So here we are sitting in December, where Christmas is literally around the corner, New Year's, and early next year will be Chinese New Year for those who celebrate, and so on and so forth, right? And so we wanted to just pause and consider what exactly is celebration, which is why we thought it was really appropriate to have an anthropologist come in and perhaps give us some insight into the history of it. And then for KC to have a conversation around the impact on wellness, the impact on human beings in that domain. So let me pause and let me start with Ida, if you could, or Dr. Leggett, as you've wanted me to call you for many years. Why don't we start with the history of celebration and then take it from there? Go ahead.
Well, there's a long history, right, to celebration. It is as long as there have been humans probably on this earth. So it stretches back into prehistory as well. Before the advent of writing, I believe people probably universally took part in celebrations. But I can tell you that celebrations are part of a wider, I guess, originally religious set of rituals, right? And within rituals, you also have things like rites of passage that people would undergo. And celebrations are what you would find at the end of these successful traditions. So if someone has to undergo a ritual or they have to go through steps within their culture, that is a rite of passage. Once everything is successfully concluded, the celebrations begin. And over time, these celebrations have probably become more codified into the concept of traditions. So different cultures now have different traditions in which they celebrate. So New Year's, right? New Year's Eve traditions, Christmas traditions, birthday celebrations, all these things are moments when we basically give thanks for the changing of something old into something new. Sometimes it's the opposite. For birthday celebrations, it is the changing of something new, I guess, into something older, like 1 year older. But it is the idea that we are happy. It is a happy moment for the most part. Though there are certain celebrations like at funerals, right? Mortuary rituals upon the death of a person. I think most of us wouldn't call it a celebration, but within those moments, we do have celebrations of life. And a lot of times those celebrations of life are sad, but they are impactful, right? They are important. And there are moments that we want to celebrate. We want to honor.
Commemorate.
And remember.
That's really fascinating. So I just want to pause here, and I'd be interested to hear from KC. What do you think is the impact of celebration on a person's, I want to say mental health, but it's just like in terms of a person's health and well-being, or a culture's health and well-being? What do you think is the impact of celebration on that?
I think collectively, the last 3 years, 2-3 years, since the pandemic, it's been, I mean, for many of us, it's been challenging to varying degrees. I think it's immensely important to kind of, have some kind of stop point or milestone to go, okay, great, let's draw a little conclusion here. Let us remember the parts that didn't go well, but also take stock for things that have gone well, express gratitude. As Ida was speaking, it got me thinking about harvest. For the longest time in human history, a lot of the celebration comes at the end of the planting season, where people celebrate bountifulness or whatever it may be, end of a season. And it's really important if we look at last 3 years. I mean, of course, there isn't a sort of grand announcement or official announcement of sort, but it is important for us individually to go, whew, wow, that's the year done, or whatever it may be, or the lockdown done, or the quarantine done, like, whoa, yeah, right? To kind of celebrate the freedom, the new phase, but also to take stock of how challenging, how difficult it was, the sacrifices we made. Some of us have lost dear ones. Some of us, we ourselves had, fallen sick or were unwell for a period of time. And yeah, in clinical terms, when people are depressed, anxious, we also invite people to consider a more balanced perspective. And I guess that's where the well-being aspect of it comes in. It's very easy to get sucked into, oh my God, how miserable, how awful, the life, the challenges. Celebration gives us those little peaks, those little moment, almost an excuse to go, well, but come on, this is nice.
So for both of you, what I'm hearing is celebration is rooted. I mean, both of you have said many things, and one of the common themes is gratitude. It's rooted in gratitude and the honoring of what has just been completed, right? And it was interesting because prior to us talking, I was having a conversation with my own coach, Kelly Poulos, and we were discussing this idea of celebration in the context of coaching. And both of you have alluded to this, which is at the end of any task or project, or even an action that a coachee would take, celebration is critical because what it symbolizes is a new beginning, right? It closes the past and it starts a new beginning. And both of you have alluded to that in terms of for a culture, for health, for us to honor our past and launch our new beginning, right? Whether it's a birthday or a ritual. That's really interesting. Go ahead.
I think it's also that we mark time with celebrations. It is a full stop, right? And then the beginning of a new sentence or a new paragraph in our lives. So it is expressing gratitude. It is marking a moment of significance, but it is also for us individuals a chance to show that we have finished something and now we're going to begin something. My your niece, Sophie, right? My daughter is going to graduate in May and with her bachelor's degree. And that graduation is a celebration because it marks the end of one thing and the beginning of something new. And I'm so glad, Casey, you brought up the COVID thing, because I feel like for those 2 years, 3 years, it was just one long slog. Even though there were moments, we had Christmases, we had New Year's, we couldn't celebrate, right? We weren't able to be together and we weren't able to congregate in groups. And so it just felt like one long, depressing year, those 3 years.
Yeah, more than 1 year. Here's
1,000
another,
days.
yeah. So here's a question. Well, not really, well, yeah, an observation, because both of you I know really well. And I know both of you entertain, right? You certainly for KC, I mean, the level, if ever you guys get a chance, uh-oh, Casey, you're going to get lots of requests now. The amount of detail that Casey puts into his entertaining, the wine that he serves, the food that he serves, the pairing up, you know, and Ida, you are entertaining your friends. You have them come over and home cooked meals. So a thought that I have is that celebration is not just on the receiving end.
Mhm.
It's also in the hosting of celebrations. And I'm curious for both of you, what does that evoke for you as a host or someone who puts on an event that is celebratory? What does that evoke in you?
Oh, wow. I think very much like a psychologist, and I host with the
Even when you're entertaining, you mean?
when I plan to entertain,
Yeah.
right? I think about the experience. So I mean, in all fairness, the food really is food. It's just food. I mean, I'm not doing some kind of 5-star, you know, whatever.
Yes.
I mean, it's fairly home cooked, you know, standard fare. But then again, you know, it has some nice touches to it, a little packaging. I think about, you know, where people sit, how they would mingle, what are the music that would go well with the group. Yeah, what kind of party it is, what kind of theme. In a sense of, we could just be congregating, gathering for generic reasons. Oh, we haven't seen each other for a while. Or it could be something fairly specific. Ooh, you know, someone just recovered from COVID, for example, or Christmas. I mean, this is the season for it. Or Thanksgiving. We had a few of them last couple of weeks. Or is it Chinese New Year? Right? Will there be children here? And how will that impact everyone's experience? Right? And my sense is that people do want to come and celebrate, and everyone, it's in a festive kind of happy mood, but there's also space sometimes, as Ida said. It could be an honoring, a commemorating celebration that maybe, you know, to mark a difficult experience. Right?
What does it evoke for you as the host when you host a celebratory event?
I think I want people to enjoy and have a good time. Right. A lot of sharing and giving, and I think connection, the word connection comes to mind, right? Having people come together. So we're not sitting in silence and playing with our phones. So it's not that kind of dinner, right? But also it need not be over the top.
So I'm hearing from KC, and then I'd love to hear from you, Ida. I'm hearing connection for you. Interesting. Ida, what is it for you?
I actually don't entertain very much. And I think it's partly because it's a responsibility. Even if it's just another, you know, couple of people coming over, it's a responsibility you take on, because you are in charge of creating a mood and also making sure that they are happy. So perhaps that the celebration is fulfilled, right? It is truly celebratory. So I tend to not do that because I'm not sure. It makes me nervous to think about that, but I do like it when other people do it. So KCI should be on your list next time I'm in Singapore. All right.
But that's such a solid point. I think the degrees and the variation in terms of how we celebrate. I mean, we've all had huge, I mean, massive birthday parties, like just like hundreds of people, right, to mark like an 80th or something. I mean, God, it's a hall, it's a proper event. We've also had intimate, like 3-4 people kind of small birthday parties. So I think Ida brought up a really solid point when it comes to celebration. I mean, do the version that works for you and, the one that you want to have. I think when we think about celebration, I think I'd like to believe that we move past some tradition where it needs to happen a certain way, and increasingly people are adapting to, doing the version that makes sense to them. I mean, I remember growing up as a child, oh my God, Chinese New Year was like a 15-day affair. It required like the whole shebang, like you need to go to groceries like 2 weeks in advance, and, and there's a list of people to visit. It was a complicated affair for 2 weeks, right? These days, it's more simplified, I say.
This is actually, it's really interesting, the direction of this conversation, because I put here, note to self, gradients, the gradient of celebration, right? Because of course, I'm considering for all the listeners or viewers that we all have exactly as what both of you are saying, we all have our ways, our own personal ways of how we are comfortable to celebrate. And it can look like, to use your example, Casey, the 15 days of Chinese New Year, or it can be, I'm going to go sit alone in the park and just observe the flowers because I've been running so fast in this whole year, and that's totally legitimate. And what's really interesting for me, and this is, a question I'm going to just throw in there for the listeners, viewers, the two of you, is where, it's this idea of calibration. Where could I create a ritual for myself? Where is there a space? Is there some form of calibration that's available for me that I haven't considered? Right? And I think that's actually a really interesting question. I mean, it can be associated with a big event like Christmas, New Year's, Hari Raya, Chinese New Year, Deepavali, whatever it is that people celebrate. Or it could just be, it's the end of the week. And it's been a really tough week, and I'm just going to celebrate with ... fill in the blank, right? So gradient is really interesting, even for me.
I love what you're saying so far and how personalized it is. The one thing that comes to mind is I was working with a couple yesterday, and they were upset that their quote unquote ritual of a date night was interrupted. And that got me thinking about your question. And what a sweet, loving notion to, to declare on a weekly or bi-weekly, whatever period that makes sense to the couple, that this is the night for us. No mother-in-laws, no children, like zilch. I don't, no football, no, knitting club, just the two of us. We will go out like when we were dating. We would talk about stuff, maybe have a drink or two, maybe have a spa together. And I absolutely love my work for that reason. It got them thinking about what was missing, and how they want to, I guess, in some sense, celebrate their relationship, their journey, right? How was the week or the 2 weeks for the both of them? Because it's so easy to get sucked in, like what Ida was saying, the doldrum, just the repetitiveness, it's Groundhog's Day, wake up next day, like, wait, didn't I just do this yesterday?
Yeah, Groundhog's Day, yeah.
But there are also some things I think that are consistent with what is celebratory. And sometimes official celebrations are more stressful, are more like you don't like them, right? So they don't bring happiness. So I think celebrations should be a marker, at least of joy, because sometimes joy is not happy, right? Sometimes it's based in sadness, but it is about the recognition of something good. And sometimes celebrations are about marking an end of something, end of the week, end of the year. And I also think celebrations are when we kind of do things up. So we dress up, or we, we dance when we don't usually dance, or we, maybe we drink more than we usually drink. We eat more than we usually eat. So those moments I think are celebratory, and they can be private celebrations. You celebrate by yourself the marking of say a promotion. That's still a celebration. Or it can be a group. It can be a group community event. But sometimes what we think of as celebrations, like a big Thanksgiving dinner, is actually more stressful for some people than celebratory. So we have to take out like the aspects of it that would make it a true celebration for people. And people can figure out like what they enjoy. It could be going, for a long hike in beautiful countryside. They might like that. For a lot of people, going to a nice restaurant that you don't usually go to and eating food that you wouldn't make yourself. So those are just some examples. I do the food thing.
Casey, take note.
Sorry.
Just a thought, is what I'm also hearing is that celebration, no matter what the gradient is, it accesses a part of our being that isn't normally accessed, is what I'm hearing. So I'm hearing words like freedom. Someone said freedom earlier. Freedom. There's a being something different, or being different, going to different places, accessing freedom, going for a hike in a beautiful place, which accesses something that I don't normally access on a weekday, for example. So that's also what I'm hearing, that celebration can be associated not just with specific dates, which obviously it can, but it's also associated with accessing a different part of me, a different part of me.
And as Ida was speaking, it got me thinking about the emotion bittersweet. So sometimes celebration, it's a bit of that. It's like what Ida was saying, it's the start of something, but also the end of something. And for us psychologically, it could elicit a feeling of loss. It's like, oh, I'm not going to be an undergraduate. I don't get to, hang out with my mates. We're not going to meet up every week, go to the cafe, or, the fun of doing group research. I'm not sure if that's going to spark some traumatic memories for other people, right? But it is on some level of a bittersweet experience, a loss of sort, a promotion. Oh my gosh, obviously someone was at the peak, the height of their capability, their competence, such that they got promoted, and then they will now go into an uncharted territory, going, OMG, I'm starting at level 1 all over again. I've never done this before. I miss the good days where, I go to work, I can do this with my eyes closed, right?
That's actually, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Finish your statement.
Which then brings us nicely to the question that you were asking earlier about coaching, right? Because there we go. The nature is we're trying it for, something new. We've not done this before. We're clearly unskilled. We have some training, and, people are out in the field every day going, great. I had a session. I don't quite know how it went. Let's talk. And it might be waiting that.
Yeah, the thought I have about coaching is, to piggyback on what you're saying, is in coaching, in order for something new to grow, something has to be completed, or there needs to be a quote unquote death of something else in order for something new to grow in that space, right? And so it's that moment. We can call it celebration, we can call it honoring, we can call it completion, but it's really interesting how we started this conversation from a place of culture and where it came from, impact on us as human beings, but there's also a piece around how critical it is in order for human beings to move forward powerfully, it sounds like, right?
And a thing about celebrations is also the emotions that are tied to it. A wedding is a celebration, and it's a joyful moment. So I think a lot of celebrations are joyful, but they are also hopeful. And so that is when, you know, some things end, you kind of are hopeful about what, say, the new year begins, right?
I want to point out something quite tender here, like a wedding. It can also be quote unquote sad on some levels. So some brides feel quite what's the word, like I don't live with my parents anymore, or I'm not going to, you know, be with my father on a daily basis, because, you know, the bride now lives with the husband. You know, they have a new home. I mean, it's a hopeful, it's, you know, quote unquote right, but there is also this part that, you know, sometimes bride and perhaps sometimes groom cry for that reason, like, no, you know.
That's interesting, because that piggybacks on what we were saying before, which is, in order for something new to grow,
Right.
right? The past, it's honoring the past, but there's a close to a chapter.
There's a conclusion.
There's a
or
conclusion or completion, right?
Yeah. And
And then-
Casey's point of bittersweet, it is bittersweet.
Interesting. And polar in rituals, there's polarities
Mhm.
of emotions, right?
Mhm.
There can be, in what one would have stereotypically called a joyous occasion, sadness and joy can coexist. Having a child, you know, where it was just me and my husband. Now there's this bittersweetness. There's a ending of what used to be and a new beginning. So polar emotions could coexist. That's really fascinating. So, mhm.
I also want to inject in, at the start of any phase, it's this, there could be this feeling of uncertainty, this sense of loss, like, oh my God, new child, I have not
Sense of
done this
loss.
before.
Yeah.
Right? And people feel a little hesitant, like, oh my God, yay, new baby, yay, new bride, yay, wedding. Oh my God, how are we actually going to do this, right? And it's not uncommon to hold multiple polarities at the same time. It's old and it is new at the same time, right? It is exciting but frightening at the same time.
Interesting.
Right? It is, you know, we're supported by culture, but we are also trying to be individuals at the same time. We're old and new at the same time.
So fascinating. Really fascinating. So we're going to bring this conversation to a close. Honestly, I think we could talk about this forever. And I just want to say that for us to do this together, I think is really apt, because we're talking about, you know, families and friends and celebration. And for me to do it with family and with friends is such an appropriate way for us to conduct this particular conversation. So as we bring this to a close, I just want to ask each of you anything you'd like to leave the viewers or listeners with in terms of their continued exploration of celebration. Any thoughts?
Well, one thing I would like to say is our celebrations and the way we celebrate change as we change.
Mhm.
So don't expect to celebrate honestly in your 50s the same way you did in your 20s. It changes as we change, as we get older and wiser. It follows us, and it is, I think, important to calibrate your sense of joy and hope to who you actually are versus who you think you ought to be, right? Looking back in the mirror rather than looking at yourself as you are. I think that's an important point about sincere, honest celebration.
I love that.
I absolutely
Casey?
love what Ida was saying. I mean, I remember there was a point in time where the assertion, the statement, I could have danced all night, was true. Right at this point, it's like, I could, but I'm quite sure I don't want to. So that brings me to the point where I think it's important. It's quite similar to what Ida is saying, for people to celebrate in ways that are consistent, that make sense to them, right? Appropriate for the occasion, the people they are with, and where they are in life. I think this notion of individualized experience of celebration, there's a generic version of a wedding, but increasingly we see people doing beach wedding or private wedding, destination weddings, and I absolutely love that. I invite people to celebrate the ways that, like what Tini was saying, if it's a private solitary walk in the park, if that's your way, you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just to close our session, I'd love to wish everyone your version of completing the year, whatever that may look like, whatever journey you've been through in the last 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, that you customize it to suit what works for you. But wishing all of you listeners, the two of you viewers, a wonderful end of the year. And thank you so much, guests, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.